What's going on, guys? All right, so you clicked on this video. It is because you were interested in the Sony ZV-1. So let's go ahead and dive into this right now. Starting off with price. Basically, you can get this for 750 bucks on Best Buy and Amazon. I saw it for 748. You could probably find some deals on Amazon where it comes with like an extra battery or a memory card, something like that. So just keep that in mind. I found it on Best Buy. They had $100 off, so I got it for 650. So keep that in mind. Best Buy normally has really good deals. Just keep an eye on it. Sometimes you can find it for a little bit cheaper. Now, as far as focal length goes, we're looking at a 9.4 to 25.7 millimeter, which is equivalent to full frame cameras at a 2x crop, equaling a 24 to 70. So basically you get a 24 to 70 with the crop factor on this camera. So take that into account as well. It is a smaller sensor, so you have to keep that into account, especially when you're trying to zoom in or crop in on images while you're editing them. Now, as far as the aperture goes, it goes from f1.8 to f11, and I believe with the smaller 1-inch CMOS sensor, there is a crop for that too, or a factor. So I think the true aperture on this camera is f4.9 to f29.7. I could be wrong. If there's anybody out there that knows the math on how to figure that out for crop factors, go ahead and drop that in the comments for me. Anyways, so you get 24, 35, 50, and 70, so you get a full range. Something to keep in mind is at 24 millimeters, you get the f1.8 aperture. At 35, 50, and 70, you get an f2.8. So essentially, once you zoom past 24 mil, you don't get the f1.8, and I think it goes from like 26 and a half or something like that is like f2 and blah, blah, blah. So take that into account. Keep that in mind when you're purchasing this camera. Now, as far as the photo information goes, so a little bit of information on this. Like I mentioned, it is a 1-inch CMOS sensor. It takes 20 megapixel JPEG and RAW. Something to talk about here in a little bit. You also get an electronic and mechanical shutter. You get optical zoom up to a 2.7 times and a digital zoom up to 44 times. ISO ranges from 100 to 12,800. So for video resolutions, you get 4K 24 and 4K 30, 1080, 24, 30, 60, 120. And then the high frame rates, which is 240, 480, and 960. The high frame rates are recorded in HAVCS HD formats. You do get the Sony lineup for picture profiles, including S-Log and Cine and basically all that stuff, which has a minimum ISO of 1000 on the ZV-1. So if you do use like an S-Log or an S-Log 3 or something, even though this is 8-bit video, just keep that in mind. You will have a higher minimum ISO for that. And the 8-bit video really isn't all that pleasant to color grade. So if you do plan on using that, keep that in mind. You're not going to be able to really do a lot of heavy color grading with that. So in addition to high resolution internal recording, uncompressed HDMI output also enables the use of an optional external recorder for clean 4K recording with 422 sampling. So you get a little bit of an edge there, but basically if you're using this camera for anything other than like short form content, if you're using it as your main video camera for YouTube, I guess you might want to consider purchasing like an Atmos Ninja for around $500 or $600. That's up to you. I honestly think if you're going to spend 750 bucks, you may also want to consider maybe even just picking up something that has like an APS-C or a full frame. You'll probably get 8-bit in a lot of those too, but I feel 8-bit on like even my EOS RP, I'm able to push and pull the colors a lot more. There is no S-Log or C-Log on that, so it is what it is. So if you're going to be using the ZV-1 for like any sort of content, and you want to use that 4K recording at 422 sampling, just take that into consideration. A couple of the neat features on the ZV-1 are the background defocus, which basically lets you switch immediately to the maximum aperture of f1.8 or 2.8, depending on your focal length, using a custom button function for isolating your subject using shallow depth of field and bokeh. There is also a built-in ND filter, which benefits using that in the bright lighting conditions for controlling overexposure, and I will attest to that. Whatever Sony put in there as a quote unquote built-in ND, works miraculously, and it is great for a lot of like those super, super bright scenes. So if you're recording during the middle of the day, you just switch that over. You might have to stop the aperture down a little bit, but take that into consideration. You don't have to bring anything with you. There is also the product showcase setting, which is ideal for vlogging and product showcases, which allows quick and smooth focus transitions between a subject's face and an object placed in front of the lens. It is pretty nice, especially if you're using that as your main camera for like YouTube or something, or even like an overhead shot. You do get that nice kind of smooth transition. Something other to talk about as far as smooth stuff goes, there is the smooth skin filter. I wouldn't recommend using anything other than the low setting, as the medium really kind of smooths out a lot of your image and the high seems really unrealistic. I would say either low or not at all. The smooth skin effect is nice for people that want to kind of like beautify themselves, but in all honesty, I think that it makes the video look worse, and that's just my opinion. Now, I want to go ahead and talk about the image stabilization and the autofocus on this camera, because the image stabilization is great, but if you do a lot of walking and vlogging, you'll definitely want to use the advanced image stabilization, as the standard isn't much better than not using the image stabilization at all. As far as the advanced image stabilization, you will notice a definite crop. The autofocus is also outstanding, and even with sunglasses on, the ZV-1 holds focus on your face. I think that Sony may have used this autofocus that you find in their newer flagship Alpha series cameras, but I can't confirm that as I wasn't able to find any information about it. You do not get the eye autofocus in the product showcase mode when it is turned on, so just take that into consideration. You will probably have to turn the product showcase mode off if you want the eye autofocus. I tried using it one day and I couldn't figure out why it wasn't attaching to my eye until I figured that out. Now, as far as slow motion goes, you get a true 1080p at 120 frames a second. You also get 60, which does have eye autofocus. There is an option, like I mentioned, for 240, 480, and 960 frames a second. It basically takes a burst photo and stitches them into a clip from the information that I could find. Now, take this into consideration if you plan on using any of these really high frame rates. 240 is going to be the sharpest out of the bunch. So when in my testing, 240 frames a second was still sharp, but basically once you get into 480 and 960, it looks dull and blurry. You do get, like I mentioned, autofocus in 120, but you will get the eye autofocus in 60. As far as the 240 and stuff goes, I could see using that in some instances, and it would be nice if the 960 didn't look like because I think that would be really cool. The 480 I think would be usable for a lot of instances, but for some reason, and I don't know why, I tried it a couple of different times. Basically, the 480 and the 960 just look like garbage, and I basically did the same thing. I tapped the focus where I wanted it, and I can't get like a really good sharp image out of that, so I don't know. Also, something that I do want to mention too is at the 960 frames per second, there is a lot more of a crop too, so just take that into account as well. I do want to go ahead and talk about the zoom lens now. Now, like I mentioned, equivalently, you get a 24-70 with raw images. So if you're shooting raw, you'll only get 24-70. If you want to take advantage of the digital zoom, you can only shoot JPEG. You can't do raw and JPEG, which kind of sucks, because as a photographer myself, I think it would be nice to get the digital with the raw, but I don't know. I don't know why that doesn't work. I guess maybe because when you zoom in, it has to like degrade the images. Because basically when you reach the end of the zoom range, it basically shoots like a 5 megapixel and it looks good from afar, but once you zoom in, you notice all the JPEG artifacts and all that stuff. So kind of unusable, especially if you want to zoom in or like even print it out. Just take that into account. Now, I do want to go ahead and talk about the lens test. So unfortunately, there is no Lightroom lens correction for this, from what I can tell. There wasn't much of a vignette, but it did, however, look like there was some possible barrel distortion, or at the longer end, it was a little bit of a pincushion distortion. Now, starting off with 24 mil, so 9.4 millimeters or equivalent 24 millimeters. At f1.8, the center is sharp, but there is some softness in the corners. But at f2.8, the corners sharpen up and the softness is gone, and around f9 you do see some softness reappear due to diffraction. Basically this goes on, so 35 mil or 13.4 mil or 35 mil with the crop at the center is sharp. There is softness at the corners at f2.8, but by about f4 the corners sharpen up, and same thing at f9 you do get a little bit of softness to reappear due to diffraction. Moving on to 50 mil, basically the same thing, so 18.79 millimeters, or with the equivalent 50 mil, you get 50 mil. So the center is sharp at f2.8, and the corners actually look pretty decent. At f4, the whole image is sharp overall, and around f9, you do get some softness due to diffraction. At 25.7 millimeters, or equivalently 70 millimeters, the center is sharp at f2.8, and the corners look good. At f4, the whole image is sharp, and at f9, you do get some softness to reappear due to diffraction. Now, as far as the noise goes for this, if you keep it below or at around 4000 ISO and below, you basically don't really notice the noise, but at around 6400 for photo, you will notice the noise to start to creep in, and it's a little bit more noticeable. If you do shoot at higher ISOs, you can get rid of it, and the new Lightroom AI noise reduction does a really amazing job. So you might even just go ahead and dabble in those higher ISOs and see how well that does. I think you get some really good, some really usable images. All right, so I had to add this in. I'm going to try to make this as quickly as possible. There's some stuff in here and for the review that I actually forgot to mention while I was recording. Number one is there is no touch screen. There is touch for like focusing. So like if you're doing autofocus or something, you can tap to autofocus, and that's about it. The close focusing distance at 24 millimeters is 4 3/4 of an inch. And then at 70 millimeters, you're looking at pretty much about almost 13 inches. I think it was like somewhere around 12 3/4. The battery door, I know people have mentioned this before about the ZV-1, but the battery door position sucks. So if you have anything attached to the 1/4-20 mount on the ZV-1, you basically can't get your SD card or battery out. Manually pulling focus really sucks, especially because they used a little dial wheel on the back of the ZV-1. I wish there was something that was a little bit better to use for pulling focus. Second thing is that it uses that same dial wheel to basically change the shutter speed and the aperture. I'm reading this all off of my phone, so you can really see that. And then that's the product showcase mode. So like a pretty smooth transition, not bad. Anyways, so uses the dial wheel to basically change the shutter speed and change the aperture, which I really kind of hate. It feels kind of clumsy, and that's just my opinion, but it is what it is. This is only the second point and shoot that I've ever owned when I started doing YouTube. So the Canon SX530HS, and then this. Also, another thing that kind of grinds my gears is the power and the mode dial button are laid out in the worst configurations, because the power button is right next to the mode button, and if you're not paying attention, you will turn off the camera, or vice versa. You'll go to change the mode or something, which is not a huge deal, but if you're recording and you try to change the mode or do something and you think you hit the mode button but turn the power off, it's going to basically cut everything out. Also, I want to say this is that when the power on screen, so basically if the camera is closed altogether and the screen is like flipped inwards towards the back of the camera, once you pop that open, it basically turns it on, which is a good thing, but then also I think kind of sucks because I believe it might also draw power from the battery, so take that into account as well. And then lastly, I should say, I wanted to throw in some audio samples. So this is the ZV-1 with the built-in audio. I do want to throw this on here and do a little bit of a talking point real quick before we jump back into the rest of the video. All right, and this is with a different shotgun mic attached to the ZV-1. This thing is nice because I don't know if many people have really showed anybody, but so this like goes into the hot shoe mount, and then this goes over top of that speaker up here, or microphone, whatever it is.
I think it's a little bit of both. This is cool because you can just kind of throw this in your pocket, or you can throw it onto the ZV-1. It doesn't take up a lot of space. Basically, I just kind of wanted to do a little comparison audio real quick, so this way you can see if you use the internal or if you use your own shotgun mic. I have a couple other shotgun mics. One's like a battery powered one, but I didn't really want to fish it out. So anyways, that's it. So let's go ahead and jump back into the video.
So I basically touched on everything that I wanted to touch on in this video about this camera. So I want to go ahead and talk to you about it from a standpoint of somebody who bought it pretty much a month ago now and has been using it pretty much almost every day. This camera, I would say, is perfect for anybody that wants to just buy a camera that they don't really want to have to spend a lot of money. They want something that's going to take good images. They want something they can throw in their pocket. They can also shoot video with. I will say this camera, I think for $750, you don't have to buy any lenses. You get a 24-70 at some pretty good aperture ranges. You do get some really nice crispy 4K, which you can use the S-Logs and stuff like that, but I don't recommend it. It does have really good built-in audio, so when you're recording, there's that little fuzzy windscreen at the top you can put into the hot shoe mount, and that basically covers the microphone at the top. But I will say this, I mean, if you're shooting short form content, or if you're shooting vlogs, or if you're just starting out and you want to get a YouTube channel going and you're not really sure which camera to buy, everybody's telling you buy this one. Well, my honest opinion is if you're looking to upgrade from shooting on a cell phone, or I would assume that there are some people that probably use GoPros to record videos and stuff with, I think that this is a better step in the right direction. I wouldn't necessarily put it past somebody to purchase this as a main video camera. There is a heat warning that you can switch, which I have noticed, and this is my own opinion, that even with the A6300 that I use at work and the ZV-1, that the battery wells get really hot. The ZV-1 I was a little concerned with because it's such a small battery. I guess maybe because it's recording some pretty nice 4K. But other than that, it's kind of odd to me because even my EOS RP, like even when I record with that, I don't really get like a hot battery well. So that's just something to keep in mind. It's a little niche thing, I guess. Maybe I found out that I possibly don't like, but that's just me. But like I mentioned, if you're starting a YouTube channel, if you're shooting short form content, if you want a good, like, just throw it in your pocket and walk around camera that you can shoot really good, nice photos with, I guess you probably could even do some professional work with this. The focal range isn't bad. I mean, it's 24-70, so I think even as a secondary camera for real estate, I'm not saying that you should use this on, for the entire thing, but maybe if you only brought one camera with a 14 mil to shoot a house or something like that, and you had this in your pocket, that you could shoot some like interior detail clips with this camera, and I think you could pull that off pretty well and get away with it. If you're trying to color match it from like a FX30 or something like that, or an FX3, might be a little bit harder, but just keep that into consideration. I mean, if you were using this camera and you had it in your pocket, I mean, it shoots really nice, really clean 4K. I mean, I have no qualms about it. The autofocus is amazing. It takes really good photos at the 24-70 range, especially if you're only keeping it in RAW. I have noticed that when you shoot JPEG, when you zoom in with the digital zoom, the images get really soft. They're really not that good looking. I took it to a Tampa Bay Rays game and I tried shooting some players or photographing some players while they were up at bat and stuff like that. And I'm like, they look good from afar. Like, if you don't crop into the image or zoom into it, you don't really notice any of the defects or like the JPEG artifacts. But if you wanted to print that out and blow it up, like, you wouldn't really be able to do that, which kind of sucks, but I mean, it is what it is. There is a like digital zoom on the video as well. It kind of like goes from 24-70 and then it hits like a stop and then it goes into the digital zoom. That video is still pretty decent. I will say, like, as far as, you know, between the 24 to 70 range, you get like a really nice high 4K. I believe once you start to zoom in, it obviously kind of starts to like digitally crop that. So you probably go from 4K to at some point like 1080 and then probably like a 720, because the image from the video, even zoomed in all the way to home plate, was still good. Like if you, like I mentioned with the photos, if you don't zoom in a whole lot, you really don't notice it too much. So you might be able to get away with it. But that's just my findings. So, I mean, the autofocus on this camera is absolutely insane. I was actually watching TV one night and I was playing around with the camera in bed, and I basically pointed it at my TV screen, and the eye autofocus detected people on screen with no problem, and I was pretty blown away by that. I mean, even my R5 can do that, but if I put my EOS RP against that, I don't think that it would do the same. That's just my opinion. I could be wrong, but I don't know, man. I mean, that ZV-1 for the price, I think it's a really good camera for 90% of everybody. If you shoot short form content, like if you do reels and stuff like that, 4K, easy to color grade, especially if you're just shooting like a regular like standard color profile. I mean, you get all the color profiles and stuff with it anyways, but like shooting in a like normal or like a portrait color profile on the camera, where you don't really have to push and pull a lot of sliders and stuff in post just to get something out onto Instagram or Facebook or whatever, it's amazing. So like if you're starting a YouTube channel, I think this is a really good camera. If you are doing short form content, if you want like a vlog camera, if you want like a travel camera where you want to do like travel vlogs and stuff, if you're going on a trip and you don't want to have to bring a bunch of lenses and camera bodies and batteries to charge, this charges through a micro USB. There is also a microphone input jack, so even if you don't want to use the internal, you can always throw your favorite little like shotgun mic on top of it and blog with it like that way. There is a record lamp on the front if that matters to some people. It's pretty nice to know that you've actually hit record and are recording. You can set up all different types of waveforms and stuff like that on it. Obviously you get like your histogram, you can do like your rule of thirds, all that stuff. I believe there was zebras on it. I didn't really look into it too much because I don't really use those myself, but I purchased this because I was going to a Blink-182 concert, and Amalie Arena allows you to bring a camera. You're not allowed to bring anything professional, and it has to be under like, I think the lens has to be under like 6 inches or something like that. But basically the point and shoot cameras are allowed. They don't give a hoot about them. So I went ahead and picked this up. I was actually looking at I think it was the Canon GX7 or G7X3 or whatever it was, that had like a crazy telephoto zoom lens on it and stuff. And I was like, man, that would be really cool to bring that. And I take pictures with like Blink really up close, but nobody had that in stock. So I went ahead and pulled the trigger on the Sony, and I haven't been displeased. I was trying to make this like a shorter video, but I know that sometimes they get a little bit long. Hopefully you guys made it all the way to the end. Thank you guys so much. If you have any questions about the ZV-1, go ahead, drop them in the comments. I'll answer them to the best of my ability. If you guys like this video, go ahead, give it a thumbs up, give it a like. If you didn't like this video, also give it a thumbs up. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit all the buttons. I'm Jordan, and I'll catch you guys next time. Peace.